All right, so WEB36, welcome to User Interface 1. Today we're going to be going over what HTML is used for in web development. We're going to be going over semantic HTML, and then we're going to be going over how to use CSS to target and style our HTML. So we're going to open up this project, and we're going to be building this website over the next week. So we're going to be building this together over the next week. We won't get it all done today. All right, so let's open this up, and we're going to start with what is HTML? So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it is used for building the structure of our website. So if you think of a website like a house, HTML would be the floor and the walls and the roof and the foundation, everything that built the structure of that house. CSS would be everything that makes that house beautiful. So the siding, the paint, the curtains, and we want to keep these two things separate. So our structure is built with HTML and our style is built with CSS. Now, what is semantic HTML? Semantic HTML gives meaning to our content. So some semantic tags in HTML would be things like the navigation tag. We're telling a screen reader or a Google bot, like, hey, this is a navigation for our site. We're giving that markup some meaning. A header would be the very top section of our site. A footer would be the very bottom section of our site. And then we would have different sections that keep things together. So if we're taking a look at this project, I'm going to get my little drawing tool out here. Like this top section here would be the header of our site. Okay, and inside of the header, we would have a navigation here. So this yellow part here is a navigation. Here we have a logo or an image. And I would probably put this in its own little box. And if we think of a section as a big container, I want you to think of a div as a smaller container that would keep things together inside of a section. Okay, divs are not semantic. They have no meaning. They are just little containers that keep things together. Okay, they don't convey any meaning about our content. So we also might have a div that goes around the links, because the links, if you notice, they're moved over to one side of the page and the logo is moved over to the other side of the page inside of the nav. The way that I like to think of a div is like this. So I'm sure all of you have little brothers and sisters or little cousins at home that have played with Lego. If there is Lego all over the floor and you want to pick it up and move it to the other room, you could pick it up piece by piece and walk it over to the next room, but that might take you days to complete. You could grab a container, throw all the Lego in the container, pick the container up, and move the container across the room, okay? That's much more efficient. So that is the purpose of a div. It's to throw everything into a container so that you could move the container around the page, okay? So all of these titles, they're also probably inside of a div, because they're moved to the center of the page together. So we could move each of these titles individually, but it probably makes more sense to throw them in a container first and move the container. And then we have different titles for semantic markup. So we have H1 to H6. H1 is the most important title on the page. If you think of your website like you would think of an essay, H1 would be the title of your essay. There's only one of those. H2 would be a subtitle. There might be multiple subtitles on the page. H3 would be a subtitle of a subtitle. H4, a subtitle of a subtitle of a subtitle, and so on, all the way to H6. So we're ranking titles in order of importance. We can always change the way they look in CSS. Okay, so let me clear these drawings, and we're gonna take this and we're gonna translate it into code over here. So if we scroll down to line 29. We can just put our cursor there and hit enter. And the very top section of a website is called what? What is the top section of a website? Go ahead and reply in that thread. Yeah, it's called a header. So we're going to open an angle bracket. We're going to type the word header. We're going to close the angle bracket. And then where the header ends, so after these titles, so somewhere around line 43, we're going to close the tag. And to close the tag, we open an angle bracket. We do a /, we write the word header again, and then we close our angle bracket. So every time we open a tag, we should be closing a tag. And you should do that right away. If you forget to close a tag, that's where your site kind of starts to break. So whenever we open a tag, we want to close a tag. So we have things inside of things. So notice that header doesn't open and close on the same line. There's stuff inside of it. We call that nesting. So nested inside of the header, if we go back to our website, we have a navigation, we have an image, we have some links, we have some titles. So let's go ahead and fill those in as well. So after the header, we have a nav, and the nav closes after our links, so somewhere around line 40. Okay. Notice that the nav is indented one space. This is to make your life easier. Okay, it's easier to find your mistakes if we can see what is inside of something else by indenting it one space. So this is pretty common practice. Okay, if a tag is inside of another tag, you want to either indent it a couple spaces or one tab over. We can fight about whether to use spaces or tabs later, but the important point here is that you're indenting it. Okay, and then we're going to wrap a container around the image. So we're going to open an angle bracket, type the word div, close the angle bracket. Then after the image, we can close the div. We're also going to wrap a container around all those links. Okay, and I'm going to leave the links alone for now because we need a little bit more information before we could fill these in. So we'll come back and fill in the links a little later. Down here, after the nav, we want another container to wrap around our titles because we're going to move our titles across the page together. And we want to put an H1 around the first title. This is going to be a site about you, so your name is going to be the most important thing on this site. H2 would be your title. So future web developer. And then your location, you can decide if that's an H2 or an H3. Like if it's just as important as your title, then maybe it's an H2. If it's a little less important, then maybe it's an H3. Okay. All right. I'm going to get a thread going. Give me a thumbs up if you are with me so far. Awesome. Lots of thumbs. Perfect. Okay, let's scroll down and build our next section. We've got an About Me section here. So I'm going to get my little drawing tool out again. We've got a section, okay, with the yellow background. We've got an H2 because it is the title of a section, so it's still pretty important, but it's not the title of the page, so it's not the most important. We've got a paragraph, which we haven't talked about yet. That goes inside of an opening and closing P tag. And then Notice that the background of the text is a different color than the background of the section. So let me get a thread going here. What is the background, or what is the text nested inside of? Nested inside of. So what is the text inside of? What do you think? Yeah, a div. Awesome. So this is a div. Okay, let's build this. Let's translate this into code. I'm going to open up my page here, and we open the section with a section tag. We close the section down here with a closing section tag. Okay, I'm going to save that so you can go and refresh that original link if you're lost. Yeah, if you get lost. Okay, then we have a div. And notice that I'm not putting like div 1, div 2. It's always just div. Okay, we'll talk about how to name tags so that we can target them specifically in the second half of this guided project when we get to CSS. But for now, well, for always, we're just calling these things what they are. So this is a section. It's always a section. It's never section 1 or section 2. I see that mistake being made often by new developers, so I just want to call that out. Okay, and then we want to close our div down here. And then we're going to wrap an H2 around that About Me title. And then we're going to wrap a paragraph. Oh, that should be an H2. A paragraph around all of our words. Okay, and if you notice here, this is starting to look a little bit more like a web page and less like a big blob of text. Okay. With me so far? Give me a thumbs up on that thread if you're ready to move on. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to scroll down to the skills section. It's a little bit more tricky. Let's talk about it. So we have a section that wraps around this blue part here. Okay, we have a title that is My Skills. What is the My Skills title? What tag would we give it? Would we give it an H1, an H2, an H3? What do you think? Yeah, I would probably give it an H2 as well. It's the title of a section. It's still pretty important, so let's give it an H2. Okay, remember that H1 can only happen once on a page, but H2, we can have multiple H2s. We can have multiple subtitles. Okay, and then we've got different skills here. We have HTML, CSS, JavaScript. These are the skills you're going to have at the end of Unit 1. So we want to wrap a container around all of these skills. Okay, they're kind of in their own little container. And then each of these skills also gets their own box, because notice that like this icon, this title, and this paragraph is here, separate from this icon, this paragraph, this title. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, what would we give those titles? You give HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you're unable to keep up, go and refresh that original link. Everything is saved, okay? Yeah, H3. Why would we give them an H3? You can go ahead and tell me in that same thread, like, why are we giving them an H3? Yeah, lesser importance. So they're titles of skills. They're still kind of important, but they're less important than the section title. So you're right, I would also probably give them an H3. Okay, and then this block of text gets a paragraph. So again, we have, this is an icon, it's already filled out for you. You get an H3 and a paragraph, and same thing here. So a div that wraps around an icon, an H3, and a paragraph. Okay, let's take this and let's turn it into code. So I'm going to clear those. We'll go back and we'll turn this into some code. So we've got a skills section. We're going to open it with a section tag. We're going to close the section tag after all of the skills. So somewhere around line 68. Might not be line 68 for you if you've given a few more spaces in there, but somewhere around line 68 after the JavaScript paragraph. Okay, I'll save that. Okay, my skills gets an H2, so we're just going to wrap an H2 around that title. Okay, then we're going to open a container. And we're going to close the container right before the section closes. That wraps around all of your skills. Okay, so I'm going to write a comment here. This opens the big container. This is how you write a comment in HTML, and a comment is something that only you're going to see. The user's not going to see it on the page. So notice that comment doesn't show up here. And I'm just going to write a comment down here that says, this closes the big container. Okay, inside of that big container, we have 3 little containers. One that wraps around the HTML skill, one that wraps around the CSS skill, and one that wraps around the JavaScript skill. So let's open a div here. And let's close it after that paragraph. And we can go in and fill out the tags here too. So the HTML gets an H3. And the paragraph gets a paragraph. And if you've got questions, get them into Slido. After we do this section, I'll stop and take some questions. Okay, so it's starting to look a little bit more marked up here. Okay, next we're gonna put another div before the CSS. So we've got the icon, H3 for the CSS title, a paragraph around my paragraph, and we'll close the container after the paragraph. Okay, so I'll save that as well. Okay, and then we're going to open our final container of that section. We can go ahead and close it after the paragraph there. Save. And then we're going to fill in each of these things. So H3 for the title and paragraph around that big block of text. Okay, so if we review that skills section again, we've got a section that wraps around the entire section. Okay, we have an H2 that is my skills. We've got a big container that wraps around all of the skills, and then 3 little containers inside of that big container. Each little container wraps around each skill. Okay, so if we go ahead and draw that again, it looks like this. Section around everything that's blue here. We've got an H2. we've got a big container that wraps around all of the skills, and then 3 little containers inside of that big container that wraps around each individual skill. Okay, let me clear that. And I'm going to stop here for some questions. What's the difference between div and section in practicality? Yeah, good question, Sam. So div does not give any meaning to content. Okay, so it is not semantic. It is just used for like a small container to throw things inside of, and then you could move the container around the page. Section does have semantic meaning, and it is when you need to keep a big group of things together. So if we go, for example, to the Lambda School website, okay, and we scroll here, this part here is a section. Okay, all of this is a section. All of this stuff looks like it should fit together. Sorry, really bad drawing skills here. All of this stuff looks like it should fit together. This would probably be an H2. It's the title of a section. Okay, we'd probably have a separate container inside of this section that keeps all of this stuff together. And then each of these little Twitter tweets would be inside of their own divs, their own little containers that we're styling to look similar to each other. Okay, so it's keeping this together. This div is keeping all of this stuff together so that we can manipulate it and move it around. And then this section, well, all of this stuff belongs in the same section. It's kind of like all in the same category. So all of that stuff would get thrown inside of a section. So I think the easiest way that I like to think about it is a section is like a big container that keeps things that belong to each other together, and divs are little containers that can be used inside of sections to keep little pieces of information together that you would need to move around inside of a section. And div is not semantic and section is semantic. What is the main difference between div and span tags? So divs are block level elements, spans are inline level elements. We're not going to get into that today. We'll talk about that on Wednesday. How do we get the 3 skill boxes aligned to the left, middle, and right? So we'll get into that on Wednesday and Thursday. So we're not going to go into CSS layouts today. Does an error get thrown if you use more than H1 on the page, or is it just convention to only have one? Yeah, good question, Eric. So we're not going to get an error if we try to use more than H1. It's just not really proper practice. So H1 is the most important title on the page. There should only be one of them. So you won't get an error, but it's just not great practice. How do you write comments in the code? I missed that. Yeah, if you missed that, you can always go back and refresh that original CodePen, but it looks like this. So open angle bracket, exclamation point, dash, dash, type your comment, dash, dash, close angle bracket. Is the practice of putting p tags around individual blocks of text purely for ease of restructuring later, or is there a technical reason why you wouldn't wrap, say, 3 paragraphs in a single P and space them using break tags? Yeah, so we don't space things using break tags. That's really, really, really bad practice. We keep styles and structure separate. So you would space things in CSS using padding or margin. You wouldn't do it using break tags. If you have 3 separate paragraphs on a page, then that is 3 separate sets of p tags that you're wrapping around those blocks of text, okay? There's a reason why we use semantic markup. And one of the main purposes is for site accessibility. So you have people using your website that can't see. Maybe they're blind. They use a screen reader, And the screen reader will interact with the semantic tags to tell the person who's using that screen reader what the different elements on your site are. If we are marking everything up in divs and spans, we have no context to give that screen reader. Okay, it doesn't know what things are on the website. If we use semantic elements, then it would say like, this is a paragraph, this is a heading, this is a section. And it gives that user more of an ability to navigate through the page using semantic elements. Okay, it gives meaning or context to your markup. And would you break long, cohesive news articles into hundreds of paragraphs? Yeah, absolutely. If there were hundreds of paragraphs in that news article, then you would use hundreds of p tags. Yeah. What are these tags? I equals class fab FAJS. These are your icon tags. So we're not really going to get into this icon library today, but I'll go into it in a bit more detail later this week. But that actually produces this little icon right here. And what happens is that we're basically using someone else's code to produce these. So it's a library that we pull into our website, and then we can use this HTML tag to produce this code, but it's referencing an outside library. So we're not going to get into that with a lot of detail today. You don't need it for your project today. But yeah, good question. Okay, my semantics are showing up in yellow, where yours appear in red. I prefer the visuals of yours. Is there a way to edit this feature? Yes, you can look up how to change settings in CodePen, but it's not something we're going to do during the guided project. But feel free to look that up. So changing color settings in CodePen, and it should be there for you. What is the H1 on that web page? Just to see an example. And H1 on which web page? If you can let me know which web page, then I can let you know what the H1 is. Will you go over how to put each div where you want it to on the web page? Yes, Wednesday and Thursday, we're going through layout. So depending on design needs, is it possible to utilize multiple H2 or H3 tags throughout the page? I'm not sure exactly what you're asking here, Travis, but yes, you can style H2s and H3s in CSS. You can also target individual H2s and H3s, and we'll get into that when we get to CSS. Okay, I'm gonna stop answering questions for now. We're gonna build a little bit more of this website, and then I'll give you a break and answer some more questions. All right, so we've got a video here. And the video is in an iframe. It's already put on the page for you. So we're actually just going to wrap a section around that video. So if we see down here, after the section for the skills close, we have an iframe. We're just going to put that inside of its own section. There we go. And we don't need to touch that for now. And then we have an experience section. So let's go ahead and take a look at how that's marked up. And let's talk about it. So we've got an experience section. The section wraps around that entire yellow part. Okay, we've got, again, a title. So let me get a thread going. What is the title? Yeah, it's an H2. It's the title of a section. It's pretty important. Okay, and then we've got 3 big divs that wrap around all of this stuff. 2 and 3. Okay, and then inside of them, we've got 3 little divs. So 1 div that wraps around the titles, 1 div that wraps around the image, and 1 div that wraps around the paragraph. Okay, again, inside of the big div, a little div that wraps around the titles, a little div that wraps around the image, and a little div that wraps around the paragraph. And then here we have two titles. So you could give both of these H3s, or you could give this an H3 and an H4, depending on how important you think they are. Here's an image, which has been filled in for you. And here we have a paragraph. Okay, so we're gonna take this and we're gonna translate it into code. So let's clear all those drawings. We'll go back and we'll translate this into code. So what is the first tag we need here? You get a thread going. What's the first tag I need? Yeah, we need a section. We need a section tag to wrap around everything here. So let's open the section tag and let's close it right here after that last paragraph. So somewhere around line 101. Okay, I'll save that. And then we're gonna scroll back up, and my experience that we decided was an H2. So we're gonna open and close an H2 around that title. Save. Okay, and then we had three big divs and then three little divs inside those. So let me show you what this looks like. So we've got a div that wraps around here. Okay, and then these are inside of their own div. This is inside of its own div, and the paragraph is inside of its own div. Okay, and we're gonna repeat this 3 times. Okay, let's mark this up together. So we've got a div here, and I'm gonna write a comment so that we can see where it stops and starts. So this opens my first big div. Okay, and I'm gonna close it down here. This closes my first big div. Okay, we're gonna open a little div here. We're gonna close it after the titles. And I'm gonna put H3 around the title of the company. I've decided that the position title is a little bit less important, so I'll put an H4 around that position title. Save. We want to wrap another container around the image because we're gonna move the image away from the titles and away from the paragraph. So we're gonna put it inside of its own container. So div, div. Okay, and then we're gonna put another div around the paragraph because the paragraph is kind of off to the side on its own. Okay, and we're gonna wrap a paragraph around that text. Save. Okay, we're just gonna take this and we're gonna repeat it 3 times for the rest of the section. So div, this opens my second big div. A little div around the titles, an H3, and an H4. Okay, and we'll take a break after this. So if you're struggling to keep up with the typing, just follow along as quickly as you can and you'll get a chance to catch up during the break. So don't stress out about that. Div. Oops. This needs to be a closing div. There we go. And we'll fill this in. The image has been filled in for us. Now we need to fill in the paragraph. And where we go. We forgot to close the first big div. We can close it down here. So div. This closes the second big div. Okay, let me save that. So if you go back to Slack and you open up that original guided project and you give it a refresh, all of this code will be saved so far, just in case you're feeling like you're a little bit behind. Okay, I'm gonna open one last big div. So this opens the third big div. Okay, we'll wrap a little container around the titles. H3, H3, and H4, H4. We're gonna wrap another little div around the image and another little div around the paragraph. And then we're gonna close that third big div. This closes the third big div. And then we can wrap a paragraph here. Save. Okay, so now this experience section is finished. And it's not looking so great yet, but remember that we style with CSS. So this isn't going to look so great until we get to the CSS part. All right, I'm gonna stop here. I'll answer some more questions and then I'll give you a little break. Let's see if there's any more questions here. Since divs are so common, is there a way in an IED to just select a big block of code and apply a div to it? Like highlight something and apply a div to it? Not really, without typing out div. Usually you would be like creating the div as you're typing in the text or the content on the page. So usually you would do those things together. So you would create the div and then put the content inside of it, if that makes sense. The indentation alignment of your divs slash sections, is that happening automatically? Slash a feature that can be ingested in CodePen settings. It is happening automatically. It's probably not a feature you want to adjust. You probably want to let it indent. That is best practice. Sometimes when I type, my current typing erases over some of the code. How do I prevent this? If you're on a PC, make sure you didn't press the insert button. That would cause the code to type over the text that's already on the page. So make sure that you didn't press input or insert or whatever that button is. Is it normal to use a div and a section together? Yeah, absolutely. We've been doing it this entire guided project, so very, very normal. A section is like a big container, a div is like a little container. Which view setting do you use to have the code on the left and the preview on the right? Let me show you. So go to change view, and it's this one right here. All right, I'm gonna give you a 5-minute break. So let me put 5 minutes back on the timer, and we'll keep going after 5 minutes. All right, welcome back, WEB36. We've got just a couple more sections to build, and then we're going to jump into CSS. So let's keep going here. We've got our last section, and what is the last section or the bottom section on the page called? So the very bottom section is called what? The very top section is a header. What was that very bottom section called? Yeah, footer. Awesome. So I'm going to get my little drawing tool out again, and this entire bottom part would be our footer. Cool. The title in the footer, this is an H2. This form is already filled out for you, so we don't need to worry about that. That's already marked up. We've got a navigation here with 3 links inside of it. And 3. Okay, so let's build this footer, and then we'll talk about filling in those link tags. Okay, so we'll jump into the project, and we're going to scroll down here. We're going to open an angle bracket, type the word footer, close the angle bracket down here after everything in that section. Okay, so I'm going to save that. We don't have the title there, it's missing, so we're just going to add it. We're going to say H2, and then in between those H2 tags, we'll say get in touch. So now if we scroll down, we can see that title there. Okay, we've got a form. We can leave that alone for now. And then after the form, we've got a navigation that wraps around those 3 icons. So we're going to open a navigation tag and then close the navigation tag here. Okay, so the navigation tag just wraps around those icons. Those are going to be links to social media. All right, so in order to fill in these links or these A tags, A stands for anchor link. We need to know a little bit more information. What we need to know about is something called an attribute. An attribute goes in the opening tag, and it is something that gives a little bit more information about that tag to the browser. Okay, some tags have required attributes, meaning that the attribute has to be there in order for that tag to function. One really good example of that is this image tag. The image tag, which is a self-closing tag, by the way, tells the browser, hey browser, display an image here. Then it has this required attribute of SRC. SRC tells the browser where to go and find the image that we want displayed on the page. So image tag says, hey browser, display an image here. The browser then goes and looks at the source and displays the image where the path is listed inside of the source. Then we have an alt attribute, and that is a description of the image in words. That is optional but highly encouraged. So this tag would be, this image would be Google logo. This would be, what was our second picture? Slack logo. And then we have Twitter logo. Okay, again, this is for a screen reader. So if someone can't see the image on the page, the screen reader is going to read out this alt description of what the image is so that user doesn't lose any context, okay? We want that page to be usable by anybody, no matter how they have to view your website. Okay, so that is a required attribute and an optional attribute. We also have anchor links. So we're going to scroll back up to our header and we're going to fill in our navigation here. So a link is something called an A tag. We open angle bracket, type the letter A, and it has a required attribute called href. Href tells the browser where to go when the user clicks on the link. Okay, so href equals some quotation marks, and inside of those quotation marks, we're telling the browser, hey browser, when the user clicks on this link, we want you to go here. Okay, what goes in between the opening and closing A tags is what the user actually sees on the page. So the user sees the word home. Okay, so we're going to do that for each of these. We're going to say href equals, and then we will close that A tag here. We'll fill in the href in a minute, but right now we're just going to wrap the anchor links around the navigation items. Href equals, and finally for the contact, href equals. Okay, important note here when we're talking about attributes, the equal sign is connected to the attribute and that is connected to the quotations. So there's no spaces in between here. Okay, these are all connected. And that's true for every attribute. Okay, when I click on this home link, I want the browser to take me to the top of the web page. When I click on the About link, I want the browser to take me to the About section. When I click on the Skills link, I want the browser to take me to the Skills section of the page. So how do we anchor to different sections inside of a page? This is where we get into the difference between our classes and our IDs, which are two more attributes that we're going to talk about right now. So an ID is used when we want to anchor to a section inside the web page. Couple rules about IDs. They can only be used once on a page. So if I call an ID Batman, I can never call another ID on that web page Batman. I can only use that ID name once. IDs are case sensitive, so if we're using capitals, when we reference the ID, we have to remember to use those capitals as well. No spaces and no special characters, but dashes and underscores are okay. Okay, so this is true for class names as well, so I'll repeat that again. So no spaces, no special characters, but dashes and underscores are okay. And IDs and classes are case sensitive. IDs can only be used once on a page. Okay, so I'm gonna come inside of this header. They can be applied to any element, and I'm going to say ID equals, and I'm gonna call it home because it's the top of the page. I can never use the ID name home again in my website. Once it's used once, that's it. I can't call anything else home. Classes are used for styling purposes. So if I have 20 divs on the page, but I want to give one div a background color of yellow, I could give that div a class of special or yellow, and then I could target that class and specifically style that div. Classes can be used as many times as we want. Everything on the page with a yellow background, I can give the class of yellow. So classes are more appropriate for styling. Divs are more appropriate for anchoring to things on a web page. However, if IDs are more appropriate for anchoring to things on a web page. However, if something already has an ID, so this header already has an ID of home, I don't have to come in here and give it the class of home or the class of special. I can use the ID to style it if the ID already exists, but I would never give the header an ID just so that I could give it a style. Okay, so if you're giving something a name just to give it a style, use a class. If you're anchoring to different sections on the page, use an ID. So I've given the header an ID of home. I'm going to give the About section an ID of about. Okay, I'm going to give the skills section, and remember this goes in the opening tag, so don't put it in the closing tag. Opening tag, I'm going to give that an ID of skill. I'm going to give the experience section, the experience section is down here, there we go, an ID of work. And I'm going to give the footer, all the way down here, an ID of contact. Okay, great. I've saved that. All of my sections that I want to reference in the navigation now have IDs. So I'm going to scroll back up to my navigation. How do I reference an ID? Let me get a thread going here. How do I reference an ID? Does anyone know? How would I call an ID name or reference an ID name? Yeah, with this symbol here. So the #, the hashtag, the octothorpe, I think is the actual correct name for it. Most of us know this as a hashtag. So we say hashtag and then the ID name. Okay, remember that IDs are case sensitive. So if this ID of home had a capital, then when I go to reference it, I also need to put a capital or it won't work. Okay, so it's probably better practice to just use lowercase where you can. Okay, so let's reference each of our IDs here. We're gonna say hashtag about for the about section, hashtag skill for the skills section, hashtag work for the experience section, because I called the experience section work, and then hashtag contact, because I gave my footer an ID of contact. If I save this, and I want to test that my navigation is working, if I click on contact, it should jump to the bottom of the page. If I click on experience, it should jump to the experience section. If I click on skills, it should jump to the skills section. If I click on about, it should jump to the about section. And if I click on home, it should just stay at the top of the page here. Okay. So let me get a thread going. Thumbs up if your nav is working. Awesome. So that is how you would link to something within a page. Pretty cool. Now, how do we link externally? So what if we want to send our user somewhere else to another website? For example, social media. Let's scroll down to the bottom navigation in our footer. We're going to wrap anchor links around each of these I tags. Okay. Remember, what goes in between the opening and closing A tag is what the user sees on the page. So the user is going to see this Facebook icon. Okay. We're going to do that for each of those. So we're going to say A, href equals, some quotations, close my angle bracket, and then after the I tag, I'm going to close my A tag. And same thing here. So A, href equals, quotations, close my angle bracket, close my A tag. Okay. Now what we're doing inside of the href is we're sending the user externally. We're sending them to another website. So here, I'm going to put the website address. I'm going to say http://facebook.com. And then http://instagram.com. If there was a profile that you were sending them to, you'd probably put like / the profile name or / the handle. Okay, same thing with Twitter, http://twitter.com. I'm going to save that. Rule of thumb here, if you are sending the user inside of your page, you don't want it to open in a new tab. If you're sending the user away from your page, you probably want that link to open up in a new tab. Let me get another thread going here. Thread, how do I open up the link in a new tab? How do I get the link to automatically open up in a new tab? You can give this a quick Google if you don't know the answer yet. If you lost your web page view on CodePen, then try to refresh, try to reopen that CodePen. Yeah, it's target equals underscore blank. So the attribute is target and the value is underscore blank. And that will open up the link in a new tab. So target equals underscore blank. Target equals underscore blank. So if I save that, if I scroll down and I click on that Twitter link, for example, something's up with the Twitter link. href equals http://twitter.com target equals underscore blank. Save. Let's give it a refresh and see what's going on. Still not working. Does anyone spot the problem with the Twitter link? It looks like there's an issue. Target equals underscore blank. HTTPS. We can try that. Usually it just defaults. No, I think there's an actual problem with the link. Oh, there we go. So now Twitter's opened up in a new tab. Okay. So yeah, now Twitter will open up in a new tab. So we'll save that. Okay, so we've built all of the HTML for our web page now. Okay, I'm gonna stop here and I'm gonna take some questions in Slido. What time is it? I'll give you another quick break and then we'll get into CSS and how to target and style things in CSS. So get those questions into Slido. Is there a benefit to typing each of these out as opposed to copy and paste keyboard shortcuts? Yeah, good question, Mary Grace. So the benefit to typing it out would be like building that muscle memory. I also like to type things out as much as I can in guided projects at the beginning, just to give people like a chance to catch up. There are some keyboard shortcuts though, and as you progress in your career, you'll definitely want to use those, you know, learn them and use them so that you could do things faster. But I think just in the beginning, typing things out just helps you build that muscle memory and remember like what the attributes are and things like that. But if you know the keyboard shortcuts, feel free to use them. All right, should I stick to lowercase for ease for ID tags? Yeah, I would. It's not wrong if you use the capital, just make sure that you're referencing the ID with capital as well. Every time I try to code before the text, like when we added the href, it will just delete the text in front of it. How do I stop this from happening? So again, I think you've probably pressed that insert key. It's really hard for me to say what's going on without actually looking at your computer screen. So if you want to pop that into the help channel, a TL might be able to support you there. But I'm assuming that you probably pressed the insert key on your keyboard if you're using a Mac, and then that types over whatever's in front of whatever you're trying to type. Is it common to use the target equals underscore blank? Yes. Every time you are sending your user away from your website, I would get the website to open up in a new tab. So if you're sending your user somewhere inside of your website, then they can, it doesn't have to open up in a new tab, but if you're sending them like to an external website, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, any other social media, you're sending them away from your site. So you probably want that tab to open up, or that link to open up in a new tab. That's a good rule of thumb. I don't understand what the href is used for. So href tells the browser where to send the user when the user clicks on the link. So the anchor tag tells the browser, hey browser, there's a link here. And then the href tells the browser where to go when the user clicks on that link. So that is the purpose of the href. It's the attribute that tells the browser where to go. All right, I'm gonna stop here. I'll give you 5 minutes and then we're gonna make this website pretty when you get back. All right, welcome back, WEB36. Let's learn how to make our websites pretty with CSS. So we're going to jump back into this project and we're going to talk about CSS. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. This means that the browser will read your style sheet from the top down, meaning that rules can be overwritten underneath other rules, so be careful of that. There are a couple of different ways to target and style elements using CSS. The first way is to just simply call the element by its name. So for example, I can say H2 color red. Okay. So CSS is made up of rules, selectors, properties, and values. This entire thing is a rule. The H2 is my selector. And then in between the opening and closing curly brackets is my property and value, separated by a colon and closed with a semicolon. What is this rule saying? Let me get a thread going here. What is this rule saying? Yeah, take every single H2 on the page and change it to the color red. Okay, so this will select every single element on the page. If I said P color orange, it would take every paragraph on the page and change it to the color orange. Okay, sometimes we need to get a little bit more specific. So this is where a class would come in. And I'm going to choose a paragraph here, and I'm going to come into the opening tag, and I'm going to give this class special. Okay. How would I select the class of special? Let me get a thread going here. How do I select special? Yeah, a dot or a period and then the class name. So I'm going to say dot special color yellow. Okay, and if I scroll through this page, I can see here my paragraph with the class of special is the color yellow. Let's change the background as well. We'll say background dash color black so we can see it. Okay. If more than one thing had the class of special, selecting special would take every single thing with the class of special and apply these rules to it. So now we've got an H3 with the class of special. If I wanted to get more specific here, if I only wanted to target the paragraph with the class of special, then I could say P dot special, which would take any paragraph on the page with the class of special and apply these rules. This H3 with the class of special would be ignored. So if we're saying dot special, we're selecting anything on the page with the class of special. If we're saying P dot special, we're selecting just the paragraphs on the page with the class of special. Okay. I can also use an ID. So if an ID already exists, I can go ahead and use it. So this background for the about section, for example, I can target hashtag about to call this section with the ID of about. And I can say background dash color sky blue. Okay, so now that background changes to blue. Okay, I can also use something called a parent-child selector. So that's selecting something inside of something else. And that looks like this. If I wanted to target the links inside of my navigation, inside of the header, and remove the underline, I don't have to go and give every single link inside of this navigation a class. I could use parent-child selectors. I could say header nav A. Here we read from right to left. We are selecting the anchor links inside of the navigation, inside of the header. And I could say text, decoration, none. Okay, and now that underline is gone. Okay, so those are the different ways to select things in CSS, and I want to give you some time to practice with that. So I'm going to break you off into smaller groups so that you can have a chance to try this, and I've got a challenge for you to complete. So before we do that, I just quickly want to talk about how breakout groups work here at Lambda. So the purpose is teamwork. You get to work together to solve a challenge. You're gonna try the concepts you just learned about. So we do, and then you do. It's an opportunity to use those brain muscles, okay? So now you're actively learning instead of passively learning. And solving all the challenges is not the most important thing because we are going to do them together as a class. I just want you to work together and get as far as you can in the time that I've given you. Okay, so your expectation in breakout rooms, I want you to unmute yourself. One person should be sharing their screen. So if no one is volunteering, I want you to be that person that says, hey, I'll share my screen. And then everybody else who is not sharing their screen is going to tell you what to type and how to solve these problems. Okay. So this will get your brain working. It's going to help you ask better questions because now you're actually doing the thing and you're going to run into real errors that you've got to debug. So it's going to help you ask better questions. And it also allows you to see how other people will approach and solve the same problem. So with programming, there's a million different ways to solve the same problem. So this gives you a glimpse into how other people would solve the same problem. Okay, and this is active learning. So this is how most people learn best, and it can feel a little uncomfortable at first, but I want you to try your best to get into the groove of it and embrace this, because this is a really good opportunity for you to try the things that we've been talking about in the class. So with that, I'm going to give you your first breakout challenge. So it just posted in Slack. Go ahead and open it up. I'm going to move my Zoom controls out of the way and we'll go through it before I put you into your groups. So you can find the challenges here in the comments listed under CSS. So challenge 1 is, can you change all of the paragraphs to have a font size of 20 pixels? Next, can you add a new class and write a matching CSS rule to turn the last paragraph blue? Next, turn all the paragraphs with the class of warning to red. Next, can you write a single rule that targets both Batman and warning and changes the font size? And then finally, can you change the spans inside of the last paragraph to the color orange? Okay, and you don't need to add a class to the span. I want you to use parent-child selectors here. Okay, so let me put you into your breakout rooms. I'm gonna put 6 minutes on the clock, and then I will call you back from those rooms when the 6 minutes is up. So opening up those breakout rooms, you'll get a prompt. Go ahead and click to join the rooms. You do have to have Zoom downloaded. You won't always get a prompt on the browser version. So make sure that you have Zoom downloaded. And I'm gonna start the countdown now. So go ahead and join those rooms. Okay, and the participation here is mandatory. So just a little reminder that if you're not joining the rooms, we have to mark you absent for the day.
So the quicker you get started, the quicker
All right, welcome back, welcome back. As we're filtering back in, let me know how that breakout went in the thread in WEB36 main channel. We're just gonna wait for the rest of your classmates to filter back in and then we'll do it together. So let me know if you struggled with anything in particular. How many challenges did your team manage to solve? Let me know how it went. You can give me an emoji, you can give me a couple sentences, whatever you prefer. Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna pause this timer so it doesn't go off, and we'll just wait for a couple moments for everyone else to get back. Finish them all. Awesome, you guys are rock stars. Okay, looks like everyone's filtering back in here now. Awesome. Okay, so just in case people didn't get it, that's totally okay. We'll do it together. And I'm gonna have you guys help me solve this as well. So the first one, can you change all of the P tags to have a font size of 20 pixels? How do I select every paragraph on the page? Let me get a thread going here. There we go. How do I select every single paragraph on the page? Yeah, I simply call the element by its name, P. And I want to change the font dash size to 20 pixels. And we can see that all of those paragraphs just grew. Okay. Can you add a new class and write a matching CSS rule to turn the last paragraph blue? So a couple steps here. What's my first step for task 2? What's the first thing I had to do? Yeah, we had to add a class. So we have to scroll down and find the last paragraph on the page. It's here on line 10. And in the opening paragraph tag, we're going to say class equals, and then give it a name. I'm gonna call it last because it's the last paragraph. Okay, and then I need to target last. So I do that by saying dot, and then the class name. So dot last. And I wanna change the color blue. So it's color blue. Okay, notice that color is spelt without the U. So just a note there, C-O-L-O-R. Okay, turn all of the paragraphs with the class of warning to the color red. Let me get a, how do I select the paragraphs with the class of warning? Yeah, so I could say dot warning because there's only paragraphs on this page, so nothing else would have the class of warning. But if I wanted to select just the paragraphs with the class of warning, I would say P dot warning. And I would change that to the color red. Okay, so now all of those paragraphs have changed red. Save. Can you write a single rule that targets both Batman and warning and changes the font size? Let me get a thread going here. How do I write a single rule targeting 2 things? Yeah, commas. So we could say P dot Batman, comma space P dot warning. And then font dash size, let's change it to 50 pixels so we can really see that change. Okay, so I'm gonna write some notes here so that you have them to reference. Comma means or, okay? So take the paragraphs with the class of Batman or take the paragraphs with the class, sorry, it means like and or. Okay, so if this rule applies or this rule applies, change the font size to 50 pixels. Okay, what if I wanted to look for something that had two class names? So I wanted it to have the class of Batman and the class of Warning. So let me, how do I look for something with two class names? I want to check that it has both. It has to satisfy both class names. How would I do that? So plus would definitely be a good guess, but it's actually just no spaces here. So we would say like P dot Batman, P, oops. Actually, we probably could only do this with two classes. Dot Batman, dot Warning. We're gonna say color blue. Okay, let me take this away for a second so that these rules aren't, whoops, these rules aren't more specific. And we're gonna give, yeah, see, this one here has a class of Batman and Warning, so it's changed to blue. And I can even change it to green, so you can see that this specific one is targeted. There we go. So if it has a class of Batman and Warning, it changes to the color green. Okay. Otherwise, if it just has the class of Warning, it stays red. So this is targeting or checking to see if it has both classes. And then a space means inside of. Okay, so if I'm looking for the paragraph with the class of Batman inside of it, I would say P space dot Batman. Okay, so this looks for the class of Batman inside of the paragraph. Okay, so I'll save these notes so that you have them to reference. Good idea to fork and save these little challenges as well so that you can go back and reference them later. All right, last but not least, can you change the spans inside of the last paragraph to the color orange? So let's see your code for the last challenge. Code for last challenge. Yeah, so the last one, there's notes here for you. So space means inside of. So this looks for the class of Batman inside of a paragraph. Yeah, so dot last or dot blue or whatever you called that last paragraph, space span. So this is looking for, looking for a span inside of the class of last. Okay, and we wanted to change the color to orange, right? So color orange. Okay, and notice that this word changes to orange because this word has a span around it. Okay, we're going to learn more about this on Wednesday, but spans, the difference between divs and spans, this was that question earlier. Spans are inline elements, meaning that they only take up as much space as they need, and they don't break things to a new line. Divs are block elements, meaning that they take up the whole space, and anything after it would start on a new line. Okay, so span, if you wanted to change the color of like a word, you would wrap a span around it. Awesome. Okay, well, what happens if we write two rules for a single element? Which one would get picked? Okay, that's what we're going to talk about next. So the short answer would be the most recent or most specific one. The long answer is that CSS calculates specificity value based on how we write the selector. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple different scenarios here, and we're going to talk about them. So if I write a selector for all of the paragraphs, and then I write another selector for just of the paragraphs with the class of warning, and I change one to red and one to blue, which one gets picked? And I'm going to show you here in the thread what that would look like. So I have a P tag, and I've changed the color to blue, and then I've targeted p.warning underneath it, and I've changed it to the color red. So here, which one wins, red or blue? And you can go ahead and give me your vote. Red. Okay, most people are saying red. Why does red win? Go ahead and justify your answer on that thread. You're correct, but why does red get picked? Yeah, it's more specific. So if we go back here, because some of these have a class of warning, I'm just gonna comment this stuff out for a minute. Oops. Let me comment all this stuff out so we can write our own code here. Okay, so we're saying P, color blue. So every paragraph on the page is turning blue. And then underneath it, we're saying p.warning, color red. Okay, so the paragraphs with the class of warning are going to change to red because this rule is more specific. Okay, I've got another problem for you here. Let me get another thread going. Okay, what about the following code? We've got P color red and P color purple. Which one wins, red or purple? Okay, some people are saying red, some people are saying purple. Justify your answer. Okay, some people are saying red because it cascades down. Some people are saying purple because it cascades down. Let's see what this means. So CSS stands for cascading style sheet. It means the browser reads the style sheet from the top down. So if we had P color red and P color purple, purple wins. Why? Because it comes after. It is the most recent rule. If both of these things are of equal specificity, which they are, P and P are targeting the exact same thing, because this one is more recent, this one wins. This is really bad practice. You wouldn't rewrite code underneath. You would go up and delete the first rule if it no longer applies. But if you have P color red somewhere in your code, but it's changing purple, make sure that you don't have a rule accidentally written underneath that changes the color and targets the same thing. Okay, so just a kind of a good to know. All right, final problem here. We've got 2 more pieces of code. So now which one gets picked? We've got wrapper space P color green and then P color red. So red or green, which one wins? Okay, most people are saying green. So let's see what this looks like. So I'm going to take a div here, and I'm going to give it the class of wrapper. And then I'm going to close the div down here. So it wraps around all of the paragraphs. And I'm going to say dot wrapper space P color green. Okay, so all of my paragraphs have turned green because they're all inside of the class of wrapper. Now I'm going to come down here and say P color red. Nothing happened. Okay, so green is still winning here because this is more specific. So targeting the paragraphs inside of wrapper is more specific than calling every paragraph on the page. Right? I have a chance for you guys to practice this as well. So let me drop this code pen for you. We're going to go through one more practice and then we'll stop and take questions in a break. So let me pull this up. There you go. Open that up. The challenges are here. So style the links inside of the nav, change the color and the font size. Style the links inside of the paragraph, change the color and the font size. You don't have to add any classes here. We're going to use descendant selectors to do this. Select all of the LIs on the page. LI stands for list item. They're nested inside of an unordered list, which is the UL. So change all of the list items on the page to green, and then change the grocery list to your favorite color. Okay, so let me put you back in your breakout rooms. So you'll get different rooms this time. So go ahead and join those. I'm going to give you another 6 minutes, and I'll call you back when the time is up. So go ahead and join those rooms. Just a reminder that breakout rooms are mandatory and that we are keeping track of who's joining, and we'll be marking the attendance accordingly. So please make sure that you're joining those breakout rooms. All right, welcome back. How did that go? Give me like a thumbs up or a thumbs down or something on the thread. Got some thumbs ups in the cameras. Awesome. Good. Not too bad, right? It just takes some practice, some getting used to. We've got some caterpillars on that thread. I'm not sure if that means you had bugs or it's just an emoji we like. Okay, we'll just wait for everyone else to get back. Most people are filtering back in. So if you're back in the main room, let me know how that went. It looks like everyone's coming back now. Okay. Not so good for some people, so no problem. We will do it together. And then we'll take some questions. So style the links inside of the nav and change the color and the font size. So without giving all of those links their own class, how would I style the links inside, inside the nav? Yeah, nav space A. Nav space A targets the links inside of the nav. So we want to change the color. So let's say color orange and the font size. So font dash size, let's say 25 pixels. Okay, so notice that those links inside of the navigation have now changed. Okay, now I want to style the links inside of the paragraph. So again, we're just going to use those parent-child selectors. We're going to call the paragraph first because it's the parent. And the thing inside of the paragraph is the anchor links, so P space A. We're going to change the color, so I'm going to say pink. And the font size, so font dash size, we'll say 50 pixels. We'll make them really big. Cool. All right, select all of the list items on the page and change them to the color green. How did you select all list items? How did you select all of the list items on the page? Yeah, just call the selector by its name. Ally, color green. Okay, so now all of these list items have changed to the color green. Change the grocery list to your favorite color. This one is always tricky for a lot of people. Let me get a thread going here. How many of you managed to solve this? Give me an emoji on that thread if you managed to solve this. Okay, a couple people. The thing that is tricky here is that we've got to get specific. So if you just targeted the grocery list, if you just said .groceries, color gray, it's not going to work. Why isn't this going to work? Because we're not changing the unordered list. We're changing the things inside of the unordered list. So we've got to get specific here. We've got to call the list items inside of the class of groceries, and then it will change. Okay? All right, I'm gonna give you a break because I know you have been paying attention for a while now. So go take 5 minutes, get some final questions into Slido, and we're gonna go through the project and answer questions after the break. So I'll see you in 5. All right, welcome back, WEB36. Ooh, lots of questions. Okay, perfect. Start with this one. Corey asks, when declaring a class, if you put a space between two words, they count as individual classes. So if you're adding spaces in class names, they would count as two separate classes. So if we go back here, and you see how we have like a space in between Batman and Morning. So this paragraph has two classes. It has the class of Morning and it has the class of Batman. Okay, so if I changed all of the classes of Morning to red, then this paragraph also has the class of Morning, so it would also change to red. If all of the Batman classes had a font size of 20 pixels, then this paragraph would also have a font size of 20 pixels. So it has both classes here. So if you needed to add more than one class, you would put a space in between the class names. Yeah, good question. All right. You said CSS reads from the top down. Is that how every language reads in a browser, or is that something unique to CSS? Really good question, Sam. So HTML and CSS aren't programming languages, they're markup languages technically. So that is true for HTML and CSS, but it's not true for a lot of programming languages. So for example, JavaScript doesn't exactly work like that. It executes differently in the browser. We get into like this idea of hoisting and things like that, which we'll get into when we get into JavaScript week. But this is true for HTML and CSS, that it reads from the top down. Is it necessary to have p.batman and p.warning if just Batman and .warning will work? Is it just good practice? Is it just more specific? Yeah, good question, Joshua. It is just more specific. So it depends on what you're trying to target would be the best answer. If you want to target anything on the page with a class of warning, then just .warning is fine. If you're looking specifically for the paragraphs with the class of warning, then you would have to write p.warning to be specific. But if you're targeting anything with that class, then just .warning will work perfectly fine. Pedro asks, when you are changing something in a class called Batman, what is the difference between Batman and p.batman? Yeah, so very similar to the last question. .batman would target anything on the page with the class of Batman, so a section, an H2, a paragraph, etc. And p.batman targets only the paragraph with the class of Batman. Travis asks, on the first question in the last activity, we initially only put nav and changed the font size, but the color didn't until we changed it to nav space A. What is the reason for this? Yeah, good observation. So a lot of font styles are inherited, meaning that if you apply a style to a parent, it is inherited to the children. Things like color are not inherited. So with color, you have to apply it to the specific selector. So things like font size, if you apply it to the body, then everything on the page will inherit that font size or that font style. But things like color, you've got to target the specific element. So that is why. Can you show us the difference between p.batman and p.space-batman? So p.space-batman wouldn't do anything, but I can show you the difference here. So p.batman, color red, targets all of the paragraphs with the class of Batman. If we're looking for p.space.batman, color orange, nothing's going to change because there's nothing inside of these paragraphs with the class of Batman. So this is looking for a class of Batman inside of a paragraph, not on the paragraph, but inside of it. Okay, so if we change this span to have a class of Batman, then it changes to orange, okay? Because now there's something inside of a paragraph with the class of Batman. So this, if you see a space, I want you to think parent-child selector. It's looking for something inside of something else. And in this case, we read from right to left. It's looking for the class of Batman inside the paragraph, okay? Why the A after the nav? How does that specify the nav at the top? Will there only be one nav? So if we go here, why the A after the nav? If we take a look at the navigation, what does the nav have inside of it? It has anchor links. We're specifically targeting the links inside of the navigation here. So we have to say nav space A. This targets the links inside of the nav. Okay, here we're targeting P space A. This is targeting the links inside of the paragraph. If I comment this out, and I comment this out, and I just target A, color purple, font dash size 50 pixels. Okay, this targets every link on the page. So with nav space A, we're being specific to the links inside of the nav. With P space A, we're being specific to the links inside of the paragraph, okay? Good question. All right, is there a way to check what lines of code are changing the colors or fonts of them? What do you mean, is there a way to check? You should be checking when you write the code. So you should be like LI color green, is that targeting the list items and changing it to the color green? If it's not, then you probably need to get more specific. So you would check as you're writing them. You could also comment things out. So if you're not sure if this is working, you could comment it out. Okay, this is back to black. So if we uncomment it, we could see like, okay, in fact, CodePen's being a little slow, but this is green, so we can see that it's working. So does that mean A is targeting anchors? Yes, A is targeting the A links here. Okay, we're calling the element by its name. A is targeting A, P is targeting paragraphs, nav is targeting nav. If it's a class, then it needs a dot in front of it. So if we're targeting the class of groceries, that's why we have dot groceries, space LI, which is targeting this element here. So if we're calling the element by its name, we simply just say the name. We don't need the angle brackets inside of CSS. Okay, good questions. All right, let's talk quickly about today's project, and then I'm going to let you go for lunch. So in this engage section, the first part is the user module project. Being a little slow, but you've got 2 projects to complete today. The first project is basically what we did during this guided project. We're taking all of this text and we're marking it up using semantic HTML. Okay, so make sure you're reading the directions here. Fork the project so it's yours, practice marking up the content. And then the next project, you're focusing on CSS. So both of those projects you have to do today. And here you're going to follow the rules. So update the font size to 60 pixels and center the text. Update the font size to 30 pixels. Create a selector for all the paragraph tags and have the following styles. Okay, so you're just going to go through and complete all of these tasks. At the end of the day, how do you submit your projects? You're submitting 2 links in one form. So how do we submit both links? Yeah, the URLs together with a comma, no space. Perfect. Okay. And then you have an exit ticket, which is your quiz. So if you click next, you've got your quiz here. And then your survey. And then you are finished for the day. Okay, so I'm going to check to see if there's any final questions, and then I will let you go for lunch. What time are the projects due? They are due by end of day. So 5 p.m. Lambda time is when those projects would be due. All right, I will stop here. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to Lambda School. Welcome to day one. Make sure you're taking a break and come back after lunch and get started on those projects. Post in the help channel if you need any help. Remember to be specific. So tell us what the problem is, tell us what you've tried, and give us a little snippet of that code, and we will be in the help channel to help you out. Have a good day.